Think about the last time you went to see a play or, even just watched a really gripping movie.
Oh, yeah. Like a really intense drama.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Your attention is completely dominated by the actors. I mean, you are watching the drama, the dialogue, the conflict between the characters.
That's the whole point of being there, right?
Yeah. And while all of that is happening, you treat the stage like the literal wooden floorboards, the painted backdrops, the physical props as just background scenery.
Yeah, it's just the inert stuff sitting there so the main event can actually, happen.
Exactly. It's just a container.
Right, as long as the floor holds the actors up, you don't give it a second thought. The physical space is entirely secondary to the narrative.
Yeah. But when you step into the theological framework of the physical world, and I mean the literal earth we walk on, the soil, the water, the ecosystems, and you view it through the lens of early biblical literature, that entire perspective gets violently flipped upside down.
Oh, completely. It's a total paradigm shift.
It really is. We are looking at a narrative landscape where the stage itself is actually the primary subject of the opening act. It is not just a container for human drama. It is deeply, fundamentally, morally charged.
And that shift in perspective changes the very definition of human existence. It's the absolute opposite of background scenery.
Right.
I mean, if we view the physical world merely as a disposable stage for a spiritual play, we fundamentally misunderstand our own job description as human beings.
Which brings us to our mission for today's deep dive, because we are examining a profoundly paradigm-shifting essay by Chris R. Velazquez.
Yeah, his piece titled Human Dominion and Stewardship.
That's the one. We are going to deconstruct our modern assumptions about words like dominion and environmentalism. And we are going to look at the deep ancient roots of what it actually means to inhabit the physical world.
It's such a crucial topic.
It is. And Velazquez makes this incredible assertion early on. He says, a thin doctrine of creation produces a thin doctrine of humanity.
Yeah, that sentence is really the anchor for his entire argument.
It hits hard.
It does. Because when he says a thin doctrine, he's talking about a worldview that treats the physical universe, trees, soil, animals, even our own bodies, as a temporary neutral backdrop.
It's just stuff that's there.
Right. And if you operate under the assumption that the material world doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, then human labor, agriculture, urban planning, economics, and technology all lose their ultimate meaning.
They just become like stuff we do to survive.
Exactly. Just stuff we do to survive while we wait for the quote-unquote real spiritual stuff to happen.
Right, like we're just killing time in the waiting room.
Precisely. Just flipping through magazines until our name is called. But Velazquez argues that in the biblical framework, there is no separation between the sacred and the material.
Which is huge.
It is. Before there is a concept of sin to forgive, there is a physical world to tend. I mean, before there is a temple or a church, there is a literal biological garden to cultivate.
Yeah, the author's work spans everything from ethics to agriculture, because the stakes here are literally the definition of human purpose itself.
Absolutely. And to understand this, we really have to establish the baseline of reality.
Yeah.
We have to look at how Genesis 1 and 2 present the physical world.
Right. Let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah, because the text describes creation not as a cosmic accident and not as a realm of chaos, but as an ordered gift.
The mechanics of that ordered gift are fascinating to me because it's not just that things exist, it's that they are intelligible.
Yes, there's a structure to it.
Right. God speaks, and there is light, land, sea, vegetation. It follows a logic. And repeatedly, the material world is declared good, and finally, very good.
It's a theater of divine wisdom.
A theater of divine wisdom, I love that. And then humanity enters. Genesis 1:27 says humanity is made in the image of God.
Which is a loaded phrase.
It really is. Now, I've always heard image of God explained as this like internal, invisible quality. Like we have a soul, or we possess intellect, or we have the capacity for complex moral reasoning.
Yeah, that's the very standard philosophical reading of it.
Right. But Velazquez roots this idea in a highly specific ancient context that completely shifts it from a philosophical concept to a vocational one.
Yes, the historical context here changes everything.
Break that down for us.
Well, in the ancient Near East, so think of the great Assyrian, Babylonian, or Egyptian empires, Kings ruled over vast, sprawling territories.
Massive amounts of land.
Right. And a king couldn't physically be present in every single province or village, obviously.
No Zoom calls back then.
Exactly. No way to broadcast a message. So, to project his authority and remind the populace of his rule, he would commission physical images of himself.
Like statues.
Statues, yes. He would have statues carved and placed in the far-flung corners of his empire.
They were basically ancient billboards.
That's a great way to put it.
You walk into the town square, you see the statue of the emperor, and it's a visceral reminder of who holds the power. I mean, it reminds you whose laws govern the land and whose character is supposed to be reflected in that society.
Exactly. Now, the statue wasn't the king, obviously, but it signified his presence and his sovereignty.
Right.
So, when the Genesis narrative states that humans are made in the image of God, it is making a radical, almost subversive claim for its time.
Oh, wow.
It is saying that human beings, and not just kings or elites, but all human beings, are the living, breathing statues placed throughout the physical earth to represent God's wise, benevolent rule.
So it's a job title.
Yes, it is a vocation. We are appointed as representative rulers.
That immediately destroys the idea that we are just supposed to sit around contemplating our own spiritual existence.
Completely.
We are actively representing the king. And that leads directly into what theologians call the cultural mandate in Genesis 1:28, where humans are commanded to subdue the earth and have dominion.
Right, the marching orders.
Yeah. And then in Genesis 2:15, Adam is placed in the garden to work and keep it. Villasas calls this derived dominion. And the best way I could visualize this while reading the text was to think about house sitting.
Oh, the house-sitting dynamic captures the tension perfectly.
Okay, let's say you have a friend who is unfathomably wealthy.
Always nice to have a friend like that.
Right. And they own a spectacular, sprawling, highly complex estate. They have to leave for a year, and they hand you the keys.
Okay.
They say, I need you to look after this place. I need you to run it. Now, while you are living there, you possess genuine dominion. You have authority.
You're calling the shots.
Exactly. You manage the landscaping crew, you monitor the security systems, you decide what to do if a pipe bursts in the basement. You have real power to make decisions and cultivate that space to ensure it thrives.
But you do not hold the deed.
That is the crucial part.
Yeah.
You are a caretaker, not the owner. Because if you get bored and decide to, I don't know, bulldoze the guest house to build a private go-kart track, you are going to be in catastrophic trouble when the owner returns.
Oh, absolutely.
Your dominion is entirely derived from the owner, and your mandate is to manage the estate according to the owner's character, the owner's desires, and the owner's design, not your own passing whims.
And Villasas is absolute on this distinction in the text. He says, dominion is not license. Stewardship is not ownership.
Wow. Dominion is not license.
Yeah. Humanity does not emerge in Scripture as a self-authorizing species. We are not the sovereign owners of the planet. We are vice-regents.
Which introduces a massive concept of accountability.
It really does. If our dominion is delegated, then all human authority, whether you are managing a household, running a multinational corporation, drafting legislation, or farming a plot of land, stands under divine audit.
Everything is audited.
Everything.
Yeah.
How you use power over the physical world and over other people matters deeply, because dominion without accountability instantly devolves into tyranny.
But the text is also careful to warn against the opposite ditch, right? It argues that stewardship without dominion collapses into passivity.
Right.
We aren't supposed to be paralyzed spectators tiptoeing through the woods afraid to snap a twig.
No, not at all. We are meant to be active, engaged caretakers. If you look at the Hebrew verbs used in Genesis 2, when Adam is told to work and keep the garden, those verbs are abad and shamar.
Okay.
And they suggest both active cultivation and vigilant guardianship. We are supposed to develop the earth, to bring out its latent potentials, to turn raw materials into culture.
But always while guarding its inherent integrity.
Exactly. You cultivate, but you protect.
And the implications for human dignity here are staggering. I mean, if bearing the image of God is this universal vice-regal calling, then human value isn't tied to what we usually measure it by today.
Right. Our metrics are completely off.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what your societal status is, your economic output, your intelligence, or your physical capacity. Every single human being is a living statue of the king.
Villasas explicitly draws this out. The image of God means human life has intrinsic, non-negotiable dignity.
Intrinsically valuable.
Yes. Degrading another person is a direct physical insult to the Creator. You cannot separate the stewardship of the environment from the protection of human life.
They are completely linked.
They are. Humans aren't an invasive species acting upon the environment. We are God's image-bearing representatives placed specifically within it.
So for you listening to this, when you walk down the street or you look at the people on your morning commute, the framework shifts entirely. You aren't just a consumer maneuvering through an urban space.
Yeah, just trying to get from A to B.
Right. You are a representative ruler tasked with reflecting benevolence and order. It changes how you view the infrastructure, the people, the resources. You're holding the keys to the estate.
It is a profound responsibility. The text refers to it as a vocation of love. But as we are all painfully aware, that is not the reality we currently experience.
Not even close. I mean, if we are holding the keys to the mansion, the roof is currently caving in, the pipes are leaking, and the caretakers are hoarding the pantry.
It's a mess.
We look at the world and we see ecological degradation, we see oppressive labor systems, we see burnout, massive inequality, and a relentless extraction of resources.
Yeah.
So if the original mandate was an ordered gift and a vocation of love, how did the system break down so violently?
Well, this requires us to examine the fracture outlined in Genesis 3, the fall. And Velazquez makes a critical analytical point here that I think is often missed in popular discussions.
What is it?
The fall does not abolish the creation mandate.
Wait, really?
Yeah, God doesn't revoke the job description. He doesn't say, you failed at cultivating the garden, so I'm taking the keys back. Your new job is just to sit around and wait for heaven.
So the mandate to work and keep is still active.
Yes, the mandate remains, but the human heart executing that mandate becomes fundamentally corrupted. The text explains that the ground itself is cursed as a direct result of humanity's rebellion. Work becomes marked by deep frustration. The biblical imagery used here is thorns and thistles.
Which isn't just about literal weeds in a garden.
No, not at all. It represents the friction, the decay, and the resistance introduced into all human systems. Stewardship is now marked by sorrow and sweat. Instead of nurturing creation to bring out its potential, humans develop a parasitic tendency to exploit it.
We start acting like we hold the deed to the mansion. We stop house-sitting and start claiming ownership.
Exactly. We shift from tending to taking, from cultivating to consuming. We start treating the physical world and other people as mere raw materials for our own self-aggrandizement.
Wow.
And this distortion bleeds into every aspect of the biblical narrative. It manifests as violence against neighbors, the hoarding of wealth, and the abuse of land and labor. The text makes a profound theological assertion here. That creation groans not because matter is inherently evil or flawed, but because humanity has mismanaged it. The ecological crisis, the economic crisis, these are at their root moral crises.
Okay, I need to stop here and push back on something because I think it's a massive point of tension for modern readers.
Sure, go for it.
We talked earlier about Genesis 1 commanding humans to subdue the earth. The Hebrew word is kabosh. Now, historically, that word and the concept of subduing has been used as a theological blank check for some horrific things.
Oh, absolutely. It has a dark history of misuse.
Yeah, it has been used to justify manifest destiny, the violent conquest of indigenous lands, and the relentless industrial strip mining of the earth. Doesn't the word subdue inherently invite force? How can Velazquez differentiate between this biblical idea of subduing and just plain old violent exploitation?
It's a vital question, and it's the exact danger Velazquez highlights. He refers to this as reading dominion as domination, and he argues vigorously that this is a pagan misreading of the text, not a biblical one.
Wait, how is it a pagan reading?
Well, if you look at ancient pagan mythologies, like the Babylonian Enuma Elish creation itself is the result of a violent cosmic war between gods.
Right, there's always some massive battle.
Yeah, the physical world is born out of carnage, and humanity is created essentially as slave labor to feed the gods. In that worldview, humanity's role is inherently violent and extractive because the universe itself is violent and chaotic.
That makes sense.
But the Genesis narrative is a direct polemic against that. God creates through wise, peaceful ordering. Therefore, human dominion is supposed to resemble God's wise, life-giving governance, not predatory control.
So what does subdue actually mean in a non-exploitative context then?
To subdue, or kabosh in the biblical sense, means to bring order to something that is wild, to harness its potential, and to develop it in ways that are consistent with God's holiness and the flourishing of the thing itself.
Okay, can you give me an example?
Sure. Think of the difference between a master viticulturist tending a vineyard and a strip miner extracting coal.
Oh, interesting comparison.
The viticulturist subdues the wildness of the grapevines. They prune, they cut, they train the vines to grow along trellises. They exert profound control over the plant, but they do it so the vine produces optimal fruit and thrives.
Right. The plant actually benefits from the control.
Exactly. Now contrast that with the strip miner. They blow the top off a mountain, extract the valuable resource, and leave behind a toxic wasteland.
Total destruction.
Yeah. Both are exercising power, both are subduing nature, but only the viticulturist is aligned with the creator's character of cultivating life.
That distinction is incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
The viticulturist applies force and control, but the end goal is the flourishing of the subject. The strip miner applies force, but the end goal is the enrichment of the miner at the complete expense of the subject.
Right.
And Velasquez points out that when we adopt the strip miner mentality, it doesn't just damage the environment, it shatters our covenantal relationship with God. He brings up the Old Testament prophets to illustrate this.
Yes, the prophets are the clearest ancient voices connecting morality to ecology. Look at Hosea or Isaiah. They lived in agricultural societies where this connection was painfully obvious.
Because they relied directly on the land.
Exactly. Hosea literally writes that because there is no faithfulness or steadfast love and no knowledge of God in the land, because people are lying, murdering, and stealing, therefore the land mourns, and all who dwell in it languish, and also the beasts of the field and the birds of the heavens.
Wow. So the moral collapse of the humans causes the physical collapse of the ecosystem.
Precisely. They understood a mechanism that we, in our highly industrialized, insulated lives, often forget.
What's that?
That creation is not a neutral, disconnected stage. It actively participates in the covenantal life of humanity. When the stewards become corrupt, greedy, and violent, the estate itself falls into ruin. The land physically suffers under the weight of human sin.
But Velasquez is also incredibly careful to maintain a critical balance here, because today, the reaction to seeing the earth suffer from human exploitation often swings to the absolute opposite extreme.
Oh, definitely.
You hear rhetoric suggesting that humans are essentially a virus on the planet, a parasite, and that the earth would simply be better off if we weren't here.
And Velasquez attacks that mentality head-on, calling it a grave theological distortion. Any doctrine of stewardship or environmentalism that forgets or diminishes the image of God in human beings is fundamentally anti-biblical.
It misses the whole point of the mandate.
Yeah. Christian care for creation must never devolve into contempt for people. Remember the baseline. Humans are the physical representatives of the Creator.
Right.
To hate humanity in the name of saving the earth is to attack the very image bearers God appointed. The biblical goal is the redemption and restoration of the steward, not the elimination of the steward.
Which brings us to the mechanics of that restoration. We have the beautiful original design, and we have the devastating fracture where dominion turns into domination.
In current state of things.
Yeah. So if the humans are breaking the estate, what does God do to rein them in? He doesn't just let the whole system collapse into the void. He institutes specific physical guardrails.
He establishes covenants. These are binding agreements that teach a fractured humanity how to properly handle the material world again. And Velasquez points first to the Noahic covenant right after the flood.
This is the story of Noah and the ark, and the ultimate sign of that covenant is the rainbow.
Exactly. And the text points out that the rainbow isn't just a quaint symbol. It is a cosmic guarantee that God will preserve the stability of the created order.
Like a promise not to hit reset again.
Right. God promises that seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. It is concrete proof of God's ongoing relentless care for the physical mechanics of the world. Humanity is fallen, yes, but creation remains under intense divine protection.
And then the narrative moves to the formation of the nation of Israel, and this is where the guardrails get incredibly specific. We are talking about the Sabbath.
Such a fascinating shift in perspective.
It really is. Now, in modern culture, if we think of the Sabbath at all, we think of it as a day off for people. Maybe you go to church, you take a nap, you don't check your work emails.
Yeah, a personal recharge day.
Exactly. It's a human-centric rest day.
Yeah.
But Velasquez highlights Leviticus 25, which expands the concept of the Sabbath in a way that is utterly alien to our modern economic sensibilities.
Oh, completely alien, because the Sabbath commands in the Old Testament extend the legal right of rest, not just to landowners and not just to servants and livestock, but to the actual soil itself.
The dirt gets a day off.
The dirt gets a whole year off. Leviticus 25 mandates that every 7th year, the agricultural land was to lie completely fallow. It was a Sabbath year of solemn rest for the land.
That is wild.
You could not sow your fields, you could not prune your vineyards, and you could not harvest the natural aftergrowth to sell. The land had to rest.
I want to dig into the mechanics of this because it contrasts so violently with how we view the physical world today. I think the dominant modern paradigm is that we view the earth as an infinite vending machine.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
We pump our capital, our labor, and our chemical fertilizers into the machine, and we demand that it dispenses whatever crop or resource we want at maximum yield 365 days a year, year after year.
And if it doesn't?
If the yield drops, if the machine gets stuck, we just shake it harder. We add more chemicals, we genetically modify the seed, we force it to produce.
Right, we refuse to let it slow down.
Yeah. But the biological reality, which the ancients understood and which Leviticus codifies into law, is that soil is a living organism. It requires nitrogen fixing. The mycelial networks need time to recover. If you don't rest the soil, it physically dies and turns to dust.
It just becomes barren.
Exactly. So the biblical view isn't a vending machine. It's a shared bank account where God is the primary account holder.
That is a phenomenal analogy. You have withdrawal limits.
Yes, you have strict withdrawal limits, and there are mandatory system-wide holds placed on the account every 7 years so the principal can recover and accrue interest. You are not allowed to draw the account down to zero.
And the theological rationale given for this strict withdrawal limit is one of the most radical statements in the entire text.
What does it say?
In Leviticus 25:23, God gives the reason why the land cannot be permanently sold or endlessly exhausted. He says, "The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me."
Wow, the land is mine.
Velazquez describes that line as devastating to human pride. True stewardship cannot begin until the illusion of ownership is entirely surrendered to God.
Because we aren't the owners.
Right. If the land belongs to God and you are essentially just a tenant, a guest, a sojourner, then you have absolutely no right to exhaust it. You cannot treat it as an infinite machine for your own profit because you have to respect the boundaries set by the actual owner.
This introduces a concept that I found incredibly confronting when I read it. The morality of matter. Physical stuff is morally charged.
Yes.
We tend to think of spirituality as something that happens in our heads or in our prayers, completely disconnected from the physical world.
But the text argues the exact opposite. Velazquez writes that creation is morally textured because it belongs to the holy God.
Okay, unpack that. What does that mean?
This means the way we handle tangible, physical objects carries immense spiritual weight. A loaf of bread is not spiritually neutral. It can be generously shared or it can be selfishly hoarded.
Oh, yeah.
A plot of soil can be allowed to rest and regenerate, or it can be exhausted for short-term quarterly profits. Capital and wealth can be deployed to serve the common good and build flourishing communities, or they can become instruments of brutal oppression. Matter matters to God.
He explicitly says, wastefulness is a spiritual issue, a form of ingratitude. That hits incredibly hard.
It does. It really challenges our daily habits.
Because when I throw away perfectly good food because I bought too much, or when I buy cheap fast fashion clothing that I know I'm going to throw in the garbage after 3 wears, I am not just being economically inefficient or culturally trendy.
No, the stakes are much higher.
According to this framework, I am being actively spiritually ungrateful. I am mismanaging the king's estate. I am taking the ordered gift and throwing it in the trash.
It is an act of rebellion against the Creator. It is a fundamental failure to recognize the gift as a gift. But Velazquez also warns us that as we try to correct this extractive mindset, we have to avoid falling into 2 opposing ditches.
Oh, okay. What are the ditches?
The first ditch is what he calls stewardship as sentimentality.
Stewardship as sentimentality.
Yes.
Cool.
This is the trap of a vague modern environmentalism that is completely detached from any robust theology. It's caring for the earth based merely on emotion or aesthetic appreciation without recognizing the holiness of the God who created it or the unique image-bearing dignity of humanity.
So it's just about liking nature.
Right. It's a fragile framework because it lacks the deep moral foundation of why the earth matters in the first place. It reduces creation care to a hobby rather than a divine mandate.
And what's the second ditch?
The idolatry of creation. This is when the pendulum swings so far that we overcorrect and begin treating the physical creation as the ultimate reality. We start worshiping the earth instead of the Creator.
Oh, I see.
The biblical text is uncompromising on this. Trees, oceans, mountains, and animals are magnificent, but they are not divine. They are not to be worshipped. Stewardship must never blur into pantheism. Creation is a signpost. It points beyond itself to the majesty and wisdom of the one who made it.
When you lay all this out, the morality of matter, the concept of being a sojourner, the spiritual weight of wastefulness, it forces a serious personal audit.
It really does.
For you listening to this right now, look at your physical surroundings. Think about your bank account. Think about your pantry, your closet, or even your calendar and your time. Do you view these things as your sovereign property, yours to consume however you see fit?
That's an uncomfortable question.
It is. Or do you view them as morally charged resources that have been temporarily entrusted to you by a king? Take your weekend, for example. If your time is a morally charged resource, how does that change the way you rest?
Oh, that's a good point.
Do you rest in a way that honors the giver and restored your soul? Or do you exhaust yourself trying to squeeze every ounce of productivity or entertainment out of those 48 hours? It shifts the entire paradigm of daily living.
It forces us to move from an ownership mindset to a stewardship mindset. But to fully grasp how this tension is ultimately resolved, we have to zoom back out. Because the guardrails of the Old Testament law, the Sabbaths, the agricultural limits, they mitigated the damage, but they didn't fix the fundamental problem.
Right.
The human heart was still fractured. The stewards were still prone to domination and greed.
The stage is still set, the actors are still performing, but they keep forgetting their lines and actively breaking the props. The law couldn't change their nature. So how does Velazquez trace this stewardship mandate to its ultimate fulfillment? Where is this grand narrative heading?
Well, the author points us directly to the arrival of Christ. And he uses a very specific, deeply theological title for Jesus that connects the whole story back to Genesis. He refers to Christ as the last Adam.
The last Adam.
No.
Okay, explain the mechanics of that parallel because it's vital.
In the biblical narrative, the first Adam was given the mandate to exercise righteous dominion, to be the true image of God in the garden. But he failed. He gave in to the temptation to seize equality with God, to grasp for power and autonomy rather than trusting the Creator. He plunged the estate into ruin.
In Jesus.
Jesus, the last Adam, succeeds precisely where the first Adam failed. Jesus is the true, uncorrupted image of God.
But his success doesn't look like what we would expect. I mean, Jesus didn't show up, overthrow the Roman Empire, institute new agricultural policies, and physically take over the real estate.
No, not at all.
His execution of dominion looks entirely different.
And that is the beautiful, subversive paradox of the gospel. Christ exercises true dominion not by seizing power, but through radical sacrifice. Velazquez writes, where humanity seized rather than served, Jesus reigns by sacrifice. Christ is the obedient man who receives ultimate dominion from the Father, not by conquering with a sword, but through suffering, self-giving love, and resurrection. He reveals that the true shape of human stewardship is meant to be cruciform. It is self-giving authority meant to serve and elevate others.
And what he accomplishes through that sacrifice isn't just a spiritual transaction to save individual human souls. This is a point the author hits incredibly hard, and it challenges one of the most pervasive cultural assumptions we have.
Yes, Velazquez points to Colossians 1:20, which says that through Christ, God was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross.
All things.
The phrase all things is not just poetic exaggeration. Redemption is not merely about extracting human souls from a doomed planet. It is about the comprehensive restoration of the entire created order under the lordship of Christ.
I really want to lean into this because there is a massive assumption, even among deeply religious people, maybe especially among religious people, that the ultimate finish line, the end goal of existence, is to escape the physical body.
Oh, absolutely. The escape pod theology.
Yes. There's this idea that when you die, your soul floats away to a purely spiritual, ethereal heaven where you sit on a cloud and play a harp forever. And the subconscious logic that flows from that is, if the earth is just a sinking ship, if it's all going to burn up in the end anyway, why should we bother taking care of it?
Right. Why polish the brass on the Titanic?
Exactly. Why care about ecology or urban planning if the physical world is destined for the cosmic incinerator?
That is exactly the mentality Velazquez confronts under the danger of spiritualizing away creation. He argues that this view is completely unbiblical. It owes more to Greek philosophy and Platonism, the idea that spirit is good and matter is evil, than it does to the Hebrew scriptures.
Okay, so what is the biblical view?
The gospel does not erase creation. It heals it. Salvation is not an escape from matter. Remember Genesis 1, the God who made the physical world called it very good, and the God who redeems it intends to renew it, not annihilate it.
Velazquez uses a specific phrase for this. He says Christian hope is resurrection-shaped.
And we have to look at the historical and physical reality of what the resurrection of Jesus actually means in the text. When Jesus was resurrected, he didn't come back as a phantom. He didn't return as a pure, floating spirit.
Right.
He had a physical, tangible body. He walked on roads. He broke bread. He literally cooked and ate fish on the beach with his disciples. His disciples could touch the scars on his hands.
The physical stuff still matters.
This means that physical bodies matter. Matter is capable of carrying the glory of God. The physical world is not a mistake to be discarded. It is the very fabric of God's redemptive plan. The future world promised in Scripture is not a ghostly abstraction. It is a renewed physical creation.
The text points to the book of Revelation, chapters 21 and 22, to show where this story ends. And it completely subverts the escape narrative.
It does.
The future of creation isn't a fiery annihilation. It is the arrival of a new Jerusalem. And the imagery is explicitly physical. It describes a city coming down out of heaven to a renewed earth. God comes down to dwell with humanity in the physical realm. The grand narrative starts in a garden in Genesis 1, and it culminates in a garden city in Revelation.
Philasis states beautifully, creation is not discarded, it is transfigured. The curse of Genesis 3 is finally removed. The thorns and thistles are gone. And the tree of life, which was lost in Genesis, reappears in the center of the city, its leaves for the healing of the nations.
Wow.
And understanding this trajectory has a profound, immediate psychological impact on how we view our daily work right now.
Let's do some deep dive speculation on that impact. If the future of existence is not an escape from matter, but a glorious transfiguration of the physical world, how does that validate human culture? I mean, how does that change the way we view architecture, engineering, art, or science?
It infuses them with eternal significance. If you believe the physical world is just going to be thrown in the cosmic trash can, then writing a brilliant symphony or designing an incredibly sustainable, beautiful building or painting a masterpiece feels ultimately futile.
Yeah, it's just a sandcastle waiting for the tide.
Exactly. But if you believe that human culture, purified of its sin and exploitation, will actually be integrated into the New Jerusalem, which Revelation hints at when it says that kings of the earth will bring their glory into it, then suddenly every act of true, good, and beautiful cultivation right now is a tangible preview of that coming kingdom. Your work matters eternally.
The author refers to the church as a preview community or a colony of the kingdom. The calling is to model this renewed, uncorrupted dominion right now, in the midst of a broken world, a time he refers to as the exile.
Exactly. Think of how a colony functions. A colony lives by the laws, the culture, and the ethics of its home country, even when it is physically located in the middle of a different empire.
Oh, that makes sense.
The community of believers is supposed to show the watching world what it actually looks like when humanity handles creation with reverence and love. It is supposed to embody radical generosity, simplicity, sustainable care for the material world, and justice in labor as a living, breathing testimony of the restoration that is coming.
Which brings this massive cosmic theology all the way down to the ground. We've talked about the ancient Near East, the first Adam, the last Adam, and the transfigured cosmos. But how does this land on a Tuesday morning when your alarm goes off?
Yeah, the practical application.
We need to talk about the daily grind, vocation, leadership, and the profound dignity of ordinary life.
Philasis makes a point about work that should completely reframe our modern relationship with our careers. He states unequivocally that work is a pre-fall good, not a punishment.
We really need to emphasize that. Work itself is not part of the curse. Work is not a punishment.
It's not. We established that Adam was placed in the garden to cultivate it before sin ever entered the picture. There was effort, there was creativity, there was administration, there was cultivation, all before the fracture.
So work was part of the original design.
This means that ordinary labor, whether that is agriculture, teaching, writing code, plumbing, medicine, or changing diapers, has tremendous inherent dignity. It is the primary arena where we exercise our derived dominion. It is faithful cultivation.
This highlights a stark contrast between two completely different ways of viewing a job. The dominant modern paradigm is viewing work as a treadmill.
Oh man, yeah. The treadmill.
That is viewed as a painful, soul-crushing necessity. You get on the treadmill on Monday, you sweat, you stare at the clock, you put in your miles just to get a paycheck so you can survive and hopefully buy some fleeting pleasure on the weekend. The work itself has no value. It is purely utilitarian.
It's a means to an end, and it is usually exhausting and deeply alienating.
Exactly. But the biblical view that Philasis presents is viewing work as a canvas. Work is a pre-fall good. If your job is a canvas, then ordinary labor transcends utility and becomes a form of worship.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
It becomes the arena where you act as the image bearer. You are bringing order out of chaos, you are facilitating human flourishing, and you are creating value, just like the Creator did in Genesis 1.
But Velazquez also issues a warning here. To live this out, we must reject two opposing extremes regarding our careers. We must reject the contempt for work, which is the treadmill view, seeing it as mere servitude or a necessary evil, but we must also violently reject the idolatry of work.
Which is rampant in modern hustle culture. The idea that your career is your salvation, your identity, and your ultimate worth.
Yes. If you make work your ultimate identity, it will crush you, because it was never meant to bear the weight of your soul. Work is neither salvation nor servitude. It is vocation. It is a calling from the master to cultivate a specific corner of the estate.
And this deeply informs how the text views leadership. Velazquez notes that authority and leadership must be accountable and protective. Leaders are, by definition, stewards. They are tasked with building institutions that serve people, not machines that consume them.
That is so important for today's corporate world.
Think about this. If you are a manager, a CEO, a school principal, or a political leader, your job is not to extract the maximum amount of labor or capital from your subordinates until they burn out. Your job is to steward the people under your care, to protect them, to provide for them, and to build systems that actively promote human flourishing.
Because every single person you manage is an image bearer of God. You are managing the king's statues. You cannot abuse the statue and claim to respect the king.
Wow.
The shifting perspective here is monumental. It requires a complete rewiring of the questions we ask ourselves every day. The modern, fallen, extractive mindset constantly asks, what may I take? What is maximally profitable? How much can I control?
Yeah, that's what we're taught to ask.
But the steward mindset asks an entirely different set of questions. What has God entrusted to me? What does faithfulness look like here? What must I cultivate?
What has God entrusted?
Yeah.
That single question reframes everything. It means the kitchen where you prepare meals, the sterile office cubicle, the muddy farm, the noisy classroom, the quiet home. They are all equally sacred arenas of stewardship.
There is no sacred secular divide. To prepare healthy food well, to manage a corporate spreadsheet honestly and ethically, to teach a child with patience, to sweep a floor, these are not secular distractions from your real spiritual life. They are the exact arenas where we honor the Creator. As Velazquez beautifully puts it, Christian stewardship is not some niche side interest for environmentalists. It is discipleship embodied in ordinary life.
So as you go about your day-to-day, I want to challenge you to apply this framework to whatever your specific vocation is. Think about the very next task you have to do. Maybe it's answering a difficult, tense email. Maybe it's prepping dinner for your family. Maybe it's managing a complex logistics team.
Whatever it is.
How does executing that exact same task change when you do it as a holy steward? Your posture shifts. You aren't just moving pixels on a screen or chopping vegetables. You are taking the raw materials of the physical creation or the complex social dynamics of human relationships, and you are intentionally ordering them toward goodness, peace, and flourishing. You are an active participant on a sacred stage carrying out the king's business.
It gives a profound weight of glory to the absolute most mundane tasks of our existence.
It really does. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of theological and historical ground today. Let's synthesize the journey we've been on through Chris R. Velazquez's work.
It's been a journey.
It has. We started by dismantling the idea of the physical world as background scenery. We looked at creation as an ordered, intelligible gift. We explored the radical, ancient Near Eastern context of humanity as the image of God living statues, placed as vice-regents to exercise derived dominion. We're caretakers, house-sitters, not sovereign owners.
Then we examined the fracture. We saw how the fall in Genesis 3 didn't cancel our job description, but corrupted the human heart, twisting our mandate to subdue the earth into a predatory domination. And we saw through the prophets how the moral failure of humanity inevitably leads to the physical collapse of the creation.
But the owner of the estate didn't abandon it. He instituted covenants and guardrails, like the Sabbath for the land, reminding us that matter is morally charged, that wastefulness is a spiritual failure, and that the earth ultimately belongs to him.
And we traced that grand narrative to its fulfillment in Christ, the last Adam, who succeeds where the first failed, reigning through sacrifice and self-giving love. He inaugurates a kingdom that promises not to abandon the physical world, but to reconcile all things, transfiguring creation into a renewed physical reality.
which brought it all the way back down to our Tuesday morning commute. Work is a pre-fall good, a canvas for cultivation, where the daily question is no longer, what can I extract, but what has been entrusted to me?
And as we close this deep dive, there is one final lingering thought from the text that I think we need to confront. Velazquez writes a very sobering line. He says, "Every steward answers to the master." He emphasizes that God will ultimately judge how power, wealth, and land were used by humanity.
The accountability piece of derived dominion.
Exactly. So extrapolate that out. If human dominion over the physical world is never morally neutral, and if wastefulness is truly a spiritual issue of ingratitude, what if our ultimate legacy isn't just measured by the things we usually think about?
Like what?
Well, we assume we'll be judged on how we treated our family or whether we were generally honest. But what if the audit is cosmic? What if it includes an accounting of everything we threw away, everything we casually overlooked, everything we consumed without a single thought of gratitude or consequence?
Wow.
What if the material things we consider entirely disposable in our hyper-consumer modern lives, the cheap clothes, the wasted food, the exhausted soil, are exactly the things we will be asked to account for when the owner returns?
A cosmic audit of what we threw away. Because the stage matters just as much as the play. It's all part of the king's estate, and we are holding the keys. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into what it truly means to be human in a material world. Keep cultivating your own corner of the garden, and we'll catch you next time.